And please go ahead.
I'm ready to begin.
Yeah, I'm ready to begin and you please go ahead. Ward. All
Thank you,
good.
Rob.
We solved the problem.
Greetings. I'm Emeritus Professor Ward Heinzman of the City College of New York. I'm speaking from my home in the Catskill Mountains of New York State. To my knowledge, this presentation will be the first to the OSTIV of these historic glider flights that summited the world's two highest peaks, 8,848 Mount Everest in Nepal and 8,611 meter Mount Godwin, also known as K2 in Pakistan. Shit. Wow. On the 1st of February 2014, the world record holder German glider pilot Klaus Ullmann soared to the summit of Mount Everest with his S-10 VT motor glider, flying from Pokhara, Nepal. On the 20th of July, 2024, world champion Polish pilot Sebastian Kawa and co-pilot Sebastian Lampard soared to the summit of K2 with an ASH-25 motor glider flying from Skardu, Pakistan. Illustrated in red are the locations of the peaks, airports, and images of the peaks. K2 is on the border between Pakistan and China at 36 degrees north, and Skardu is about 100 kilometers to the southwest. Mount Everest is on the border between Nepal and China at 28 degrees north. Pokhara is about 200 kilometers to the west. First, I will summarize the literature about these two historic flights. Next, using information from the pilots, I will recreate the flights. We will soar Everest and K2. Then I will present the first ever speeds of rising air caused by the deflection of winds by these peaks. Finally, this study will have its first peer review with this presentation. Thereafter, I plan to submit the updated study to OSTIV's online peer-reviewed journal, Technical Soaring, for worldwide distribution and archiving. Ullmann participated in a 2013-14 wintertime airborne scientific expedition based at Pokhara, focused on Everest. This 2015 Gliding International article documents the numerous useful achievements of the expedition. At the end of the article is written, Ullmann enjoyed one last flight over to Mount Everest. With the engine shut down, the stomach climbed and climbed and climbed up in smooth air. But ascending to the summit was not mentioned. Kawa wrote in this 2013 Gliding International article of his plans to soar Everest. About the same time as the scientific expedition, Kawa and his team conducted soaring flights from Pokhara as described in this 2014 Gliding International article. Unfortunately, Kawa and team could not obtain clearance to soar Everest. Nevertheless, Kawa's father, team member, and glider pilot reported in this 2015 soaring article they made significant local soaring flights. After his experience in the Himalaya, Kawa wrote in this 2024 Winged Poland article about his dream to soar over the Karakoram Mountains of northern Pakistan. In July 2024, Kawa and the expedition's premier, permission getter, Slavik Mako trailered the ash from Poland to the airport in Skardu, the arduous 18,000 kilometer round trip journey, plus the onerous processes of obtaining the permissions, are described in this 2024 Sailplane and Gliding article. Here is an example of the arduous journey. Kava wrote inbound to Skardu at the Turkish-Iran border after costly ordeal involving blackmail and negotiations, we finally got through the border. Another example, Kava sent me a video shot on their 2024 August return trip to Poland, from which I extracted this segment. Shown as trailing the ash through a Pakistani village.
Nic nie zmieni, bo i tak jesteśmy za traktorem. Prędkość podróżna 5 km na godzinę, ale też tylko 200 km.
Can you imagine trailering your glider through this traffic?
Nic nie zmieni.
Kawa describes in this 2024-25 Sailplane and Gliding article his successful ascent of K2 and other significant soaring flights from Skardu during the late July and early August 2024. The highest peak in the center of the image is 7,821 meter Mashaberm, also called K1. This peak plays a pivotal role in the K2 ascent.
Ủa gì con khoai Is not speaking.
In early 2025, while corresponding with Kawa to document his flight in technical soaring, I reread the Gliding International article that implied Ullman had soared Everest. So I Googled Ullman soars Everest. Much to my surprise, this 2014 Aero News Network post appeared. It contains a brief flight description plus a 3-minute, 28-second video that clearly illustrated Ullman's summit at Everest. Therefore, I asked Ullman for additional documentation about his ascent. In late 2025, he sent a written description of the flight and a slightly longer version of the video. As a result, I began to incorporate the Everest flight with a K2 flight. Then in October of 2025 came the OSTIV Congress announcement. I thought, why not first present the flights there and then submit to technical soaring? So now, let us soar Everest. Ullman wrote, we had a lot of trouble to get the authorization for the whole expedition, despite more than a year of administrative work. When we arrived with a stemma in Nepal from Germany in the fall of 2013, we were blocked at Kathmandu. The route of the ferry flight is shown here. No local exploration flights were allowed. Even the transfer to our operating base at the Pokhara airport was a no-go. I needed several weeks with a nearly daily visit in different ministries to realize that I needed a connected and knowledgeable local. Finally, I found the right person to get all the authorization for our scientific flights. Fortunately, we finished more than 90% of the mission, including 3D photos of glaciers in the Dhaulagiri area, in the Seti Valley, Kathmandu cartography, and, of course, Mount Everest. Having finished the scientific missions, I had just one day left on our authorized schedule, 1 February 2014. The day was perfect. Very weak winds until 8,500 meters. I flew east from 822-meter Pokhara under power to about 200 kilometers to the Lukla Valley, following orders from Kathmandu Air Traffic Control to remain at or below flight level 195. That was about 5,900 meters. The air mass was stable with weak winds. I flew north up the valley over the Sangwashe airstrip and switched off the motor. The red box outlines the Everest region to be illustrated shortly. The fine weather along Ullman's flight path, Pokhara, Kathmandu, Lukla, Everest, is shown in the 1 February 2014 noontime true color MODIS image from a USA polar orbiting satellite. Regions of snow and ice are white. The image is courtesy of Scott Lindstrom, emeritus satellite meteorologist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Here is the Everest region outlined by the red box. Ullman's track is the red line. Ullman continued, I tried hard to find some thermals over the airstrip, but there was no lift. So I restarted the motor, and with weak southwest wind, I flew north along the valley of the Dudkosi and found very smooth lift of 0.5 meters a second at the base of the southwest face of Everest. There, the soaring began. I estimated this track of the soaring ascent by combining Ullman's flight description, his video, and my studies in the region. Shown are the beginning and ending times of the 12-scene, 3-minute, 28-second video. Unfortunately, the local times at the beginning and ending of each segment could not be determined. The altitudes of the segments were estimated from the elevations of known peaks captured in the video. The table shows soaring flight began at about 7,100 meters and ended at 9,000 meters. The highlighted segments will now be shown. Here is the first video segment. Soaring flight begins at 7,100 meters at the base of Everest above base camp. Everest is the left peak. To Everest's right are Lhotse, 8,516 meters, and Nuptse, 7,861 meters. The Khumbu Glacier is surrounded by these peaks. The infamous icefall flows down, ending near base camp. The very smooth lift of 0.5 meters a second at the base of the southwest face of Everest took me in a stable and laminar ridge soaring nearly to the summit. Circling above the Khumbu Glacier, I felt a sudden little turbulence and then a laminar wave with an amazing lift of 2 meters a second. I stopped to climb a little above the summit due to the ATC altitude restriction. I used the air brakes to descend, repeating again this once-in-a-lifetime ride to the summit of the highest mountain of the world. From that altitude, I flew back towards Pokhara, carefully avoiding Chinese airspace. Below flight level 195, I switched on the motor. My cameras allowed me to share stunning pictures with the community. Here are segments 7 through 12. Captured his soaring flight from 8,400 meters to 9,000 meters. He reaches the famous yellow band just below the summit. The yellow band is the diagonal brown line that appears in the video. In this final scene, Everest summit is under the Stemme's starboard wingtip. The region is cloud-free, except Lhotse is producing a banner cloud. Makalu, 8,485 meters, is behind Lhotse. And the third highest mountain in the world, Kangchenjunga, 8586 meters, is on the eastern horizon. Ullman concludes, "It was not my dream to do the soaring ascent in this way. Instead, flying from the lowlands of Pokhara in thermals, then in the strong valley winds of the Galagadonki, then ridge soaring on Annapurna, then finding the wave and conquering Everest is a approach I consider a real soaring performance. This is the way it can be done if you stay enough time working on the details and find the perfect weather window. But the biggest task you have to work on are the limits set by the authorities. This, in my opinion, is much more difficult than the described flight itself. Now, let us ascend K2. Pawa sent me a written description of the flight's ITC file, and many images and videos. I augmented the description with material from his published articles plus an unpublished fall 2024 essay, Karakoram Cold Desert. This image shows the flight track and altitude versus time graph called a barogram. They were produced from the IGC file using CU software. In the track, the glider ready to launch is at the red S. In the barogram, the glider's location is the vertical blue line. The launch was at 1402 local. The powered flight east is the orange line. Where the line changes to yellow, the engine becomes ineffective at 4,000 meters and was shut down and stowed. Soaring flight began there and proceeded east, then north to the ridge guarding the long east-west Baltoro Glacier. They turned right to enter the wake of Mashaburm, where the altitude was gained to permit the glide to K2, the dark blue line. The return to Skardu is the light blue line that turns green and follows the Baltoro to its terminus. From there, the southwest flight continues back to Skardu, landing at 1815. The weather during the flight is illustrated by this sunrise to sunset animation created by Scott Lindstrom. The images are from the Japanese meteorological satellite that was in geosynchronous orbit at 180 degrees east longitude. In this sunrise visible image, the approximate location of Skardu is in the lower left box, and the approximate location of K2 is just to the right of the upper box. The animation shows the air flowing from southwest to northeast, outbound tailwind, inbound headwind. The high thin clouds move away early. This is a 0900 UTC image. The time of the launch, cumuli are well developed on the ridges. Additionally, formation of cumuli reached a peak during the flight and diminished thereafter. This is the image at the time of landing and sunset. And what is seen are the sun glint off the water bodies to the east. Scholar wrote, a major problem was we were allowed to take off only after the last commercial departure. We launched at 1402. This video showed one of the last departures at 12:33, and you saw the ash being prepared for launch. We had to use auto tow combined with the engine of the glider. The van itself, 150 horsepower VW, was too weak and not fast enough for lifting the glider. The ash engine alone at an elevation of 2,300 meters above sea level and at a temperature of 36 C is not enough for takeoff, even on a runway of 3,700 meters in length. Only by working together could we have a profile similar to a winch launch. After launch, we motored south of the Sarfaranga cold desert. There we climbed in slope lift, but the engine became ineffective at the top of the 4,000-meter ridge. It was stowed. Just over the ridge, we crossed the Indus River and found the first good thermal further east along the Shirok River. The image was snapped in that perfect spiral climb just east of the Indus and north of the Shirok. The Shirok River Valley is shown in the image. Kawa continued. The Shirok River itself always provided an escape route, as it had sandy banks in some places and channeled low-level routes towards the Skardu Valley and the Sarfaranga outlanding for paragliders. After cruising northbound over 5,000-meter peaks, no names, we turned east and moved through south of the Mashaburn to the head of the Hushi Valley under increasing cloud cover. South of Mashaburn were lots of lifts under almost full cover due to a combination of wind and thermals. Kawa's video showed a brief segment of that northbound cruise. The beeping is the rate of climb instrument called the variometer, indicating they were cruising in lift near cloud base. On the lee side of Mashaburn, we could get above the Gondogoro Pass, where partly on ridge and partly on the wave, we could slowly climb. Above the mountains and not perfectly VFR, we gradually got waves strong up to 2 to 3 meters a second. Here is the animated track and CU of that 60-minute climb to gain 2,000 meters for the downwind glide to K2. The average climb rate was a half a meter a second. Heading eastbound, turning north into the wake of Mashaburn. Mashaburn will appear in the bottom left corner of the image, just briefly. Lots of searching for lift. Just at 7,000 meters. More searching. Up to 7,500 meters. 8,000. Finally, into a wave. Mashaburn lower left. On to K2. How many glider pilots would have had the patience and the insight to perform such a climb? I would not have had either. Insight, Kawa wrote in his essay, when I was carefully exploring the Gondogoro Pass east of Mashaburn, I found a wave. At the last moment, because there was no turning back, we laboriously rose above the clouds in front of the spires of Barachidi and Gondogoro. It is impressive. K1 summit of almost 8,000 meters. Behind it, huge spires, and we are escaping in front of the slope and catching the whirlpools in the rotors like over Magaruka and Shirazi peaks in Poland. In my opinion, Sebastian Kawa, when connected to a glider, soars better than any raptor on the planet. Kawa continues. Cloud cover in the afternoon gradually reduced, and at 9,000 meters, we could see an easy way to K2. In this scene, which is the beginning of a short Kawa video, K2 summit appears poking above the cloud layer. 8,051 meter broad peak is to the right of K2 across the cloud obscured valley. He continued the pan until the altimeter is shown. They were climbing through 33 meters in wave on their way to 9,000 meters. Kawa's breathing oxygen is heard, plus some cockpit chatter.
Jeszcze 200 metrów wysokości i będziemy powyżej wierzchołka K2.
This close-up of the K2 summit pyramid reveals a banner cloud is being produced. The arrows trace the cloud-free air rising on the windward faces, while moist air from lower altitudes rises in the lee of the pyramid, forming the cloud. The cloud dissipates further downwind as surrounding dry air is mixed with the cloudy air. From the 9,000 meter altitude, this video shows their downwind glide to first circle above the peak, then to settle into the rising air along the windward face of the peak. S turns in the rising air permitted them to remain at the summit for about 25 minutes. And as estimated from the CU analysis, the air had to have been rising at an average of 6 meters a second, or 1181 feet per minute for Kawa to remain upwind of the summit for that period. Gliding to K2, circling the peak, More circles now, S turns, upwind. More S turns. Heading back to Skardu. To my knowledge, this is the first airborne video of a forming banner cloud. Co-pilot Sebastian Lampard holds the camera on the wand extended from the air vent, while Sebastian Kawa holds the Polish flag from his vent. The first ever flag of any nation over the summit. Many national flags have been on the summit. Kawa continues. We found ourselves over the Baltoro flying down from K2, where there is no way to land and against the wind. We could run out of altitude. I couldn't descend, so I flew towards Skardu in the clouds. I suppose there were lots of wave crests in the area, also in the upper Baltoro in front of the Broad Peak and Gasherbrum, but we had to hurry due to ATC working hours. The arrival at Skardu Airport is the left image. Notice the deployed spoiler to reduce altitude for the landing. The runway was cleared quickly using the van. Kawa concludes, the Karakoram is better for flying than the Himalayas. Finally, preliminary results from analysis of the wind data. Oman reported smooth half-meter-second lift on the southwest face of Everest, an amazing 2-meter-second lift in wave over the Khumbu Glacier. Winds aloft at 12 noon near Everest Base from an online atmospheric sounding showed between 7,100 and 9,000 meters, the westerly winds increased from 27 to 77 knots. To offset these headwinds, Ullman increased his speed. Adding the increased speeds to the reported lift values results in the speeds of the air rising along Everest slopes caused by deflection of the west winds. The speeds range from about 1.5 meters to 5.5 meters a second. This result is consistent, roughly, with the estimated vertical speeds I published in a 1986 issue of Technical Soaring, and those are the red circles. The wave lift encountered by Ullman above the Khumbu Glacier, again circled in red, may have been an extension of the lift experienced lower over the glacier by the famous Himalayan pilot Emil Vick, soaring the face of Lhotse in his Pilatus Turbo Porter, as we documented in a 1990 issue of Technical Soaring. The vertical winds reported by Ullman and determined from Kawa's IGC file are reasonable, and hence new knowledge to be submitted to Technical Soaring. You have just experienced through soaring flight the ultimate ascent of the two tallest mountains on the planet. The pilots, Klaus Ullman for Mount Everest and Sebastian Kawa for K2, have documented the procedures necessary to make the flights in published articles and in correspondence with me reported here. Current and future sailplanes with appropriate instrumentation could produce valuable data that will improve numerical weather prediction for these regions. The improved predictions will benefit all. I want a portion of my ashes released.
Yep.
I can only thank you very much, Ward, for your emotional and very nicely collected uh, history of these two flights. And it was a pleasure to hear you with your presentation, with the videos, with your comments, and with these very nice thoughts about all this. Thank you very much, Ward.
Thank you, Rolf, for the opportunity.
Yeah, you're.
Now to get into technical soaring.
Yeah, and we look forward of. Oops.